Get that off the screen.
Welcome back to the Athlete Hackers podcast. My name is Chris Schrade.
And I am Mark Spellman. We are Athlete Hackers. Before we get to our guest today, our last episode was high school strength and conditioning coach down at the Canterbury School in Florida, Matt Booth, and it dealt with and talked about the importance of leadership and how everybody has the ability to be a leader within themselves.
Yeah, I think we got a great contrast to our typical guest, which is like a college strength and conditioning coach. He got to touch on the younger athletes coming up through the ranks, which was interesting. And certainly the leadership part of it was really good. We talked about a lot of different things, including the fact that everyone should learn how to be a leader. The stigma of, there's a certain person that's a leader has got to be wiped out, because if everyone's a leader, then we have less followers and we're stronger as a society.
Excellent. With that being said, as we told you a couple weeks ago, we have some heavy hitters coming on the show. It's taken a while for me to get this gentleman, but I am very persistent, as he can attest to.
Mark's a hunter of sorts.
This gentleman came into my life about 3 years ago, as I first attended Summer Strong 12, as I'm proudly wearing the shirt. And I don't think he understands the effect and influence that not only he and his family have, but the company that he oversees has on the individuals in this profession of human optimization. It is my honor, it is my privilege to introduce Mr. Bert Sorin to Athlete Hackers. Bert, how you doing today?
Doing great, guys. Thanks, Mark. Thank Chris. Appreciate you guys having me on the show.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely.
So for those 2% out there, 1%, 0.5% that don't know the Bert Sorin story, and actually the story of Sorinex, if you could give them a little background on who Bert is and what Sorinex is. I mean, yeah. I'd be remiss to just, you're a husband, you're a father, you're a son, you're a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, you're an influencer, but most importantly, you're an awesome person. So
thank you. Wow, those are a lot of accolades. I don't know which one is the most difficult of all of those, to be honest. They're they all kind of have a revolving difficulty scale. But yeah, thanks for having me on. So my name is Bert Sorin. Heck, I'll be 45 here soon, only child, and my father and I owned Sorinex exercise equipment. My father started it in 1980, so that was 41 years ago. So I grew up in it. I was 4 or 5 when we started, and just been in the iron game life my entire life, and being around strength and the human performance prowess. And I hate to say it's a masculine culture, but in some ways it is, because of its, the aggressiveness and the value of physical strength, mental strength. And that generally maybe seen more of as a masculine feature, although it certainly spans both male and female. But it's, especially the 70s and 80s, it was a kind of the boys club, right? So I just kind of grew up around big, strong, capable men. And it's always something I held in high regard, and learning how to be a capable person. So then you show value to the world through, early on, the easiest method was to obviously see like a physical strength. I'm strong, so I can pick up this thing, thus I have value, right? And then you kind of, as you develop, it becomes more and more evident that the physical strength isn't necessarily the end all be all. But that's been kind of part of my personal journey within it. But bottom line at Sorinex, we create strength conditioning tools for those people who want more out of life. And we've kind of the first really custom equipment company out there that made things bigger, stronger, more articulate with some of the adjustments, safer. That was kind of Dad's always his point, because he was a lifter, but he was also a builder. And so he said, well, I'm a big, strong person, and the equipment that's currently in the market that I could buy, it pretty much sucks, or the stuff that I really, really want, I can't afford. So I think I could build it myself and do a pretty good job at it. So he taught himself how to build and weld and everything like that. That was back in the 80s, and just kind of kept it going. And the idea was never to build a multi-million-dollar business. The idea was to make the strength world better and become relevant within the strength world, which is the world that he held dear and appreciated. So it was always, I kind of joke, it was a cover charge to be relevant within the industry that he thought was great. You know, strength is something that he's always held, like I said, in high regard and close to his heart. And that's always been part of that Sorin DNA. So that was 41 years ago. I came on 22 years ago after a 5-year stint at the University of South Carolina as a track and field athlete, hammer throw. So at that point, if you know about track and field is the sport of training. So you get good at training because you're doing specific things with a specific result that is in a excuse me, a closed skill, which means there's no defender, there's no strategy. The strategy is very obvious. I want to do the higher, faster, stronger. I want to do the best possible effort possible, which always boils back to training. So the training itself became something I got extremely interested in, because I could see as I got stronger or faster or whatever it may be, my sport directly was affected. Thus, I got more scholarship money. I got to travel to more places. I got more accolades. I enjoyed winning, all those fun things. So that's how really I was always into weightlifting and I always found it interesting. But once I became a track and field athlete at a SEC or an NCAA level, it became extremely important because I realized that was my ticket to being good at this sport that I've chosen. So did that for 5 years, had a pretty good run at that in college, and then went on to the 2004 Olympic trials, tried out for the team. That time I was working at Sorinex full time, kind of hard serving 2 masters. So I don't think I was doing either one of them extremely well. And in 2004, I retired from track and field, only to retire for about a year, and then got into Scottish Highland Games and went on that ride for a while because I wasn't quite ready to stop lifting and screaming and yelling and spinning around. So that was kind of my athletic career up until I was a professional Highland Games athlete, traveled all over the world doing that. And later got married, kids, got back into the outdoors that I've always kind of done. And then I, of course, as someone who loves to train, you start looking and go, okay, well, what do I train for? There has to be a reason. Otherwise, it's just effort expended. So then I started training for some of my adventures. And who knows, 5 years from now, maybe be something else. Maybe I'll start jujitsu or fighting. Start training that. Who knows?
I saw you in the gi. So, and I know.
I think they played a trick on me though. When they tied my gi belt, they kind of did it really weird. And everyone's making fun of me, like, dude, you tried. I was like, I didn't do that. Like, literally, I guess maybe this is like an initiation thing. They tie it really dumb, so when you're in the picture, it looks stupid and people get to make fun of you. Maybe that's a trick.
Was it hoisted? Was it hoisted tied it on you?
It was a guy. What was the guy's name? Like Snake? Yeah, maybe Snake. That was one of Hoist's guys.
Okay.
So no, Hoist gi choked me, which was great. But I got my first gi choke by Hoist Gracie, so that was cool. But no, there's the other fella, Snake, who I guess is a pretty well-known guy. But he tied it on. He let me borrow a gi. I just showed up in my street clothes, so I don't have any of that stuff.
I'd say the gi choke was probably the initiation, not the belt.
Yeah, that makes more sense, really. Yeah, my buddy that came with me, Josh, and he and I had never done jits before. He was like, we're both about the same size guys, and so we're doing our thing, and he's on top of me trying to choke me out. And he's like, "Does that feel?" I'm like, "Yeah, that hurts pretty good. That's probably it, And then he's like, "No," and he like, "Let me try it." And he was like, "Whoop!" And like I said, it was like you had those giant shears that could like chop through bones. It's like that was his forearms. And it was a considerably different experience when you have someone that really, really knows what they're doing. Yeah, so there's a lot of respect, and Hoist is a great guy, and actually sent me one of his gis not too long ago, signed gi, which was super cool. So I guess I have a gi now. Actually, Pete Roberts from Origin sent me a gi that I have yet to get to roll with because of just stuff.
Busy. You're busy.
Busy, yeah. And I know that if I get into something, I'm going to want to go all into it. And I also know that if I want to learn something, I want to learn it from like the best guys if possible. So I've kind of like held off like jumping into a class like until I could maybe get, you know, inoculated in with some people who really start me off the right direction, versus nothing against, you know, a guy that might be down the road. I don't want to learn a bunch of bad habits or bad stuff and then just realize I learned it reverse, the proper sequence.
You're gonna have to get up to that immersion camp up in Origin, up at
Mickler's place and I meant to go. I was invited to go up, but it was during my mule deer hunt. So I already
you got to have him move it then.
yeah, I need to get up there. And you know, Mickler's awesome, and of course Jocko's great. He was like, "You want to roll?" And I'm like, "Not with you, sir." So
well, and I mean the story that happened with him and Dudley. I mean that's a true
neck.
Yeah, that's a true story.
Oh yeah, no. Dudley told me, he was like, "No, he broke my neck." And I was like, "Perfect."
Yeah.
And Dudley's like my size. I'm like, okay, so great. And Dudley has like more fighting knowledge than I do. I mean, he's rolled probably before. So I was like, well, all right, we're the same age, we're the same size, and he broke your neck. Like, I got other stuff to do right now. I don't need a broken neck at the moment. It's like, you just had to tap out earlier. I'm like, well,
they didn't tell him how to tap. So I mean, that's a big that's one of those big things in that equation, that if it gets to just do this, they'll let go.
Yeah, unless you're asleep, and then it's a bad deal.
And it is, and I will warn you, it is very, very, very addictive.
Yeah,
everyone has said that, and that's why it's kind of like golf. You know, like when I was still throwing the hammer, people were like, "Dude, you'd be so awesome at golf because of rotational strength and power." I'm like, "Yeah, but I don't need another hobby that costs a lot of money and a lot of time. I'll save that for like when I can't throw hammer anymore."
You will, if you go down the road of jiu-jitsu, you will have another master to serve, like you said earlier.
Right. And I already have too many, right? And so that's where it's like, I would really like to do that. I don't know if I could like kind of do it, you know.
Well, it's also, I saw it the past last year's Summer Strong, I think. Who was it? Bo and Brandon rolled out some mats.
Yeah.
That had to be terrifying for some people to watch. I mean,
yeah. Well, the cool part about that is like that kind of stuff just happens at Summer Strong. It's like, no, Brandon to be like, "Hey, can I put out a mat?" Or Bo's like, I just look outside. I'm like, "Hey, there's dudes rolling around in the yard." Cool.
Well, that's actually, you know, part of the reason I really wanted you on is to discuss Summer Strong and the importance of it, and I mean how it changed my life. So, little backstory. I was going through some health issues. I had just gotten C7 and T1 fused. My legs are still numb. I had some heart issues that I'm still dealing with. And I was at work and I got onto YouTube, and Summer Strong 10, Brandon Lilly.
Yeah.
His talk. So I watched it, and I've watched it multiple times. And it had to go in, and I'm not going to talk about Brandon's story, but it went into, you know, him being a world-class elite level power lifter, and what was he once powerlifting was done because of all the injuries that he had sustained during powerlifting. So I was kind of there in my journey. I was kind of in a dark place. I listened to Brandon's talk, stalked him a little bit on social media, reached out to him, and he took the time out of his scheduled time to talk with somebody he had never met.
Yeah.
And he's like, give me a call if you need to talk. And I needed to talk because I was in a bad place. So we talked. And I don't know if you know the backstory on how I got to Summer Strong 12, but my jiu-jitsu, the guys that I did jiu-jitsu with raised all the money to fly me down there and paid for everything.
I remember that. Yeah, for sure. Got it. Okay.
So
Got it
those that's how I got down there, because I wasn't working because of my health, but you know, I got down there all paid for by the guys that I did jiu-jitsu with. And I told you before we got on air, we were going to get into this. I left that weekend. And for those people that have never been to Summer Strong and you're in the strength and conditioning or human performance, or if you just want to feel better and be better about yourself, I strongly recommend this. I left after the 3 days down in South Carolina. I got home to my car. I got on the phone and I called my mom. And I was crying. I was like, Mom, I gotta apologize to Kelly and the kids. And she's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? I'm like, nothing. I just came back from a very powerful weekend down in South Carolina at Summer Strong. Didn't really get into it with her about it. But I was like, I got to go home and I have to apologize to my wife and kids for not being the husband and father that I know I should be. And that led me to obviously build my relationship with you and build my relationship with Brandon. But, you know, really talk about, I know how Summer Strong came into existence through your father. But one of the other things about Summer Strong, I'm sitting in line for lunch on the first day, and your dad's walking, making the rounds, and he just stops and he goes, "Hi, I'm Richard Sorin." I'm like, I know who you are, Pops. And then as we're sitting there talking, I'm at the back of the line. So your father, you know, you and your father running the whole thing, he doesn't need to stand in line with me at the back. He could go up to front, get whatever he needs. He doesn't need to stand in line with me. But as we're standing in line talking just to get to know each other, he's like, "Hey, have you met Adam Nelson?" I'm like, "No." I'm like, "Hi, I'm Mark. Hi, I'm Adam." And then he's like, "Yeah, that's like a 4-time Olympian gold medal, you know, thrower." I'm like, "Okay."
Cool.
I mean, and I think the funniest part about Summer Strong is the speech that you give on day one, where you tell everybody, you know, if you've been here before, raise your hand. If you haven't been here before, you know, stand up. Everybody's welcome. But then you go into how you've had this, it's not a seminar, how you've had this gathering for so many years, and there's never been a physical altercation.
14 years in.
And what people don't understand is this is a room full of alphas.
Yes.
I mean,
very capable alphas. If you wanted to see a good fight, oh man, it would be one that would rival any Hollywood fight, because we got the horses.
But it would be even more interesting to see somebody come in and challenge the room. like another group coming in and going, all right, I'd be like, y'all are gonna get murdered.
Yeah. There's some straight dudes in that place.
Yes. So if you can talk just a little about Summer Strong, how it came to fruition, and where you see it going, really.
Yeah. So Summer Strong, we started 14 years ago as my dad's birthday, as you well know. So Pops was turning whatever he was turning at the time. 50 something. 55, 56. And I was like, "Hey Pops, what do you birthday's coming up next weekend. What do you want to do for your birthday?" And he was like, "Let's just invite people over to the gym. Let's like kind of open up the gym. Let's drink some beers. Let's cook some food. Let's lift some weights. Just have a fun time." I was like, "Yeah, all right." So I kind of put the word out to a few people. I remember the time, that's, I wouldn't say pre-social media and YouTube, but very early days. So, we told people a week out, and like 38 people showed up from 5 different states, and they just showed up and we're like, "All right, cool. That's who's here." And what happened immediately is just like, "Oh, what are you gonna do?" And Josh Hinken was there, and he started doing sandbag work. That was kind of when sandbag work was first kind of becoming in vogue. And you see some of these guys like strongmen and Olympic lifters and power lifters start doing sandbag work. It's like, "Oh, this is cool. Josh is teaching them sandbag stuff." And then that immediately kind of transitions into some Olympic weightlifting drills that some of the Olympic weightlifters kind of step on stage and they start taking people through drills. And then those guys get in, when they get done, they start squatting. And then the power lifters start working in with those guys and they start squatting. And then I look outside and a couple of professional strongmen are walking the yoke and doing stones, and guys are going back and forth. I was like, man, everyone's like put their pride and their ego aside, and they're just interested in other people's, their kind of profession or their thing. You know, a power lifter to do an Olympic lifting workout was very odd at the time. You know, you gotta think this is the early days of CrossFit too. So like this wasn't happening in the world, you know, and then like a strongman to help a functional trainer guy do strongman stuff, but then the strongman's over there trying some other thing. And then you look, you're like, man, this is great. So the idea became quickly get dissimilar sports and their expertises dissimilar, put them in a jar and just shake it up and then just see what happens. And as long as everyone comes with the right mindset of being candid, but being curious and respect, then you're going to have a great time. Because what I generally found out early in my career was throwers don't really care what other throwers have to say. Weightlifters don't really care what other weightlifters have to say. Powerlifters don't care what other powerlifters have, but they'll listen to other people from other places just out of respect. They're like, okay, like they intentionally hang with their cliques, but they're not impressed by one another. So there's this weird thing, and it becomes a pissing contest. And they all kind of like, he doesn't squat as much as me. And that becomes the determining factor. Where you put, let's say, a Navy SEAL in the same room as an Olympic gold medalist in the shot put, there's no competition. The shot putter's like, hey, that's pretty awesome. You did some stuff overseas. And the SEAL's like, hey, that's badass. Tell me about the shot put. You won an Olympic gold. Cool. And then they get to like compare and contrast their experiences and their insights about training or about mindset or about competition or about, and then you get these really, really cool conversations because there's no preconceived notion. They're not trying to see who's better because it's literally apples and grapes. There's two different dissimilar things, but when they start digging into great conversation, they realize there's a lot of similarities, and they will listen to one another because there's interest. And so that was early on, we figured out that as being one of the big parts of the equation. And then so it just grew year after year and got more and more people. And then we started kind of like inviting certain people to speak. And because at first it was just like, all right, we're going to rinse, repeat, show up. And then like, all right, you want to go. And then, you could do that with 50 or 60 people. But then when it gets 200, all of a sudden it's like, okay, like you're on at noon, you're on at 1, we'd pick those. And the cool part about it, and we still, I tell everyone, we've still yet to pay a speaker ever in 14 years. And again, it's not like to say like, oh, we're not going to pay people. No, we spend a lot of money on the event, but I think it's still so wildly beautiful that we've had some of the best speakers in the world ever, just absolute killers in every community in the human performance field and outside of it. And not one person has taken a dime to do it, so that shows me that their hearts are in the right place and that they are bought into wanting to give back and to be a part of the experience and to have the experience. I want our presenters to enjoy themselves as much as the audience. And, it's like a musical, an artist. If they love playing for people, they'll play for people. But you can pay anyone to do anything if you pay them enough. And so that's part of the litmus is, do you really want to do this because you really want to give back and learn yourself? Or are you here for $1,500? Because if that's the case, we'll do a different event, but that's not really what this is about. So it's been cool. I would say only probably 1 or 2 people ever have turned down the opportunity because of money, which is pretty cool.
I only say that because the year I went was, I think, Megan Young. She
was great.
She was there for 12 hours. Because she was in the middle of her season. So yeah, she flew in,
flew out,
talked, flew out. And I was like, okay, I can respect that.
But that just shows, right? That just shows.
That says everything about you guys.
Well, she's awesome and a great friend. I mean, but that shows a lot about her. Like, she wants to give so much. We of course took care of her flight and her travel and blah, 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 but still her time and her passion and her experience is what's so valuable. But that's the great part. And it's why I think the group and the people who have been to Summer Strong, they're so tight afterwards, because the presenters and the speakers, they know that, they laid out their heart some way, sometimes more than they ever have in their life before. We've had people go up there and tell their life story that no one's ever heard, or their wife hasn't heard, or their family hasn't heard. And so they're laying this out there raw, and they're letting the audience in on this ride. And then because of that, it's like, I'm sure you remember where you were standing on 9/11, right? You get to a point where where you were when Neil Kamimura spoke.
Oh God, yeah.
You knew where you were when Alex Oliver spoke, or when Pat and Kaz. That's one of those things, and that's the combined experience that people have. That's the magic of it. It's like, we're all in this together. We're on this ride. It's not stopping for a minute. So let's ride this thing out and see what happens. And if we could create that, that's the killer of it.
The funny part with Neil's presentation, and there was a funny part, but it was way at the end.
He's very funny.
I mean, okay, so Chris, you got to picture this guy. He's forging a knife, and while he's forging the knife, he's giving you the backstory on his life. And I can't do everything that he's been through. I can't do that justice. So
yeah, you need to watch it. If you watch it on YouTube, Neil Kamimura, Summer Strong 12, I believe.
Summer Strong 12. Yep, yeah. That one.
It's worth it. It's worth
it. It's definitely worth it. And if you don't watch it, you're a jackass. So there. Yeah. But he gets to the end of his presentation, his talk, and he's looking at his blade, and he goes, "This is the shittiest knife I've ever made." You could understand if you listen to his talk and everything he's putting out there for people that don't know him. As you said, it was raw as hell. I mean, probably out of all the talks that weekend, his might have been the rawest and most emotional that I remember.
I mean, I have a hard time thinking there's been some amazing presentations, but as far as raw, I don't think there's ever been one more potentially. And everyone has their own thing, right? They've had their own where they went to their level,
Yeah.
But that one, I mean, there's so many that just have blown me away, but Neil's blew my face off.
I'd be interested. I don't know if Neil could have done that talk without forging a blade.
Right. It's like a musical artist. A lot of times, like, especially if you're a singer, they have to have a guitar in front of them because it acts as a shield.
Yep.
They could look down the guitar, they could still emote, they could do all their stuff, but like just standing there singing to a crowd, it's like a security blanket.
Okay. With your company and your career, where do you see the strength and conditioning athletic performance field going? Where do you hope that it goes? And how do you think it can and should improve?
Interesting.
There's a loaded question for you.
Oh yeah, you're gonna say it probably. It's interesting. I mean, I've been in it long enough where I've seen the pendulum swing a few times. There was definitely the bro science. I wasn't even bro science back in the day. It was just hard ass work is all it was. And then it became like the NSCA style, like science behind things, which I'm totally down with. I mean, that's where the science of training came in. Really, you're going to do this because of this, and this because, and these are your desired results. Here's your hypothesis. Here's your conclusion based on your data. That's great. And then you had just work. And then I would say 8 to 10 years ago, the recovery started coming on. And I agree. Recovery, number one thing. I mean, you got to have it, right? That's half the equation. I'll be probably a little unpopular, but I think, I was one of the first people in our industry that jumped on the recovery train. Like, I wouldn't say the first person, of course, but like within my scope of folks, like I was one of the first ones of like equipment manufacturers and guys like that were really looking at alternate recovery methods. 20 years ago, we were doing stuff, whether it was like, contrast and this, that. And I mean, the track and field world, you always kind of on the cutting edge of some wacky stuff that's coming down the pipe. So I was down with that immediately, and I saw that as a super vibrant light of success. But when it was started being monetized and programmed in so much, where everything had to be based on a prehab, a rehab, a recovery, I think it started, and you started getting the regulations and like having to only have so many minutes in the weight room and all this. So you started getting litigated down to a very small window of dosage of exercise or of a stressor. And but we got to keep our recovery super high. And you hear a lot of people saying this, is like, work hard enough where you need the recovery. I think in some ways we're underworked. And now in the 90s, I think it was a little bit of the opposite. I know I was constantly overtrained. Even though I was trying to recover, we were just doing so much volume and so much effort. But looking back, we were breaking eggs, making those omelets. Like, we were going for it. And you could, when you're riding that edge, you know, when you're going on that vision quest and riding that ragged edge of human performance, you're going to hang way ass over the guardrails at times. Like, that's how that is. It seems like we're very afraid to get to the guardrails now. We got to stay in the middle. We got to make sure our recovery is absolutely optimized. And I'm like, I just think a lot of people are soft now. They're soft, and they're I don't see the numbers that I used to see in a weight room. Now, these days, of course, there's less knee wraps, there's less straps, belts, other supportive gear, but you don't see a whole lot of just nasty 600 for doubles and triple squats. You just don't see that often. And do you need it? I don't necessarily know either, but it seems like more of a mentality of just like search and destroy. Like, just go for blood. I mean, that was the mentality that we had in my training group. Now, we were somewhat extraordinary from that regard, but I've been to a lot of colleges and I don't see that just killer mentality. Everything is not everything. It's not driven by the coaches as much, but the kids are a lot more interested in, you know, the social media and all this other stuff. Like, what do they look like? And all this other, like, I got to pop off this cool thing. I'm like, man, there's something about just, you know, a 5 sets of 5 at 405 in the squat that just sucks. and you're going to probably, you know, depending on your strength level, hey, you might piss blood tonight. You're probably going to have an elevated heart rate and an elevated, you know, temperature tonight, because you're going to be screwed up for a while. You're going to, like, all these things are going to happen, but until you're pushing so hard over that ragged edge that creates that super compensation where you need those high recovery methods, I think we've just softened a little too much.
Yeah, I
dissertation.
No, I would definitely agree with that. I think everybody's looking at recovery, but they're not putting in the work. I mean, in order for an organism to change, you have to stress it. I mean, if you do not stress the organism will stay the same.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched some workouts, some training sessions, and still there's a ton of people still doing the right thing, no questions asked. And I don't want to sound like a dinosaur, but I look at some of the volume of hard work and I kind of go, y'all are done? Like, that was it? And some of it's just like, hey, coach, we only have 37 minutes to have these guys in here today, and like, we got to get it done. I go, okay. You had 2 sets of heavy cleans and 1 set of heavy squats when it was all said and done, and then some kind of accessory work. I'm like, well, okay. Now I get, we balanced it more. We have some more running and plyos and movement and stuff like that. I just don't see the simple work done as much.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in keeping it simply savage. It's a KISS principle. It's a little different than what people are used to, but, you know, do the simple things savagely well, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, looking back in college, you know, you're talking 1994 through 99, we had 5 females at the University of South Carolina on our track team that the same day squatted 405 for 5. Females in the 90s. 5 for 5 reps. 405 for 5 reps, 5 different females. And so you look at it and you go, they didn't know that was extraordinary. They knew that was what they were supposed to do because the other 4 girls were doing it. And that was what coach had on the program. And eventually they worked up into it. But, the cool part about it is 4 out of 5 of those girls were multi-time All-Americans and NCAA champions and American record holders because they thought that's what you were supposed to do. And I used to laugh. I go, yeah, you get a female as strong as a man, she's going to throw that implement far because she's still throwing the little girl implement,
Yeah, she's throwing a smaller implement, but doing this
and she's strong as a man. Yeah, I could throw a female implement super far. And that's what you're basically doing. But I look back and go, yeah, but that was the dosage of exercise that was given, and almost to an uneducated populace because they didn't know that was extraordinary. They just thought that was what you're supposed to do. When a female benches 225 for 6 reps, because they think you're supposed to. But you see those things happen. And at the time, we just thought it was how it was. And I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, those girls were so strong. And our guys were stupidly strong as well. But you look back and you go, wait, why were we so strong? And you go, oh, because we thought we were supposed to be. There was nothing to push off of and go, well, yeah. I mean, if you're in this weight room, you better be cleaning 3 blues, as we would say, which was 140 kilos. You better at least be able to clean 140K, and you better at least be able to squat 500, or we just don't even think you're trying. And it kind of goes back a little bit like the old West Side days in the 90s. Everyone was that strong. And if you're going to play, you just had to do that. And I think, unfortunately, there's a fear now of, we don't want to hurt these guys. I get it. You don't want to hurt guys. Were we hurt often? Sure. But we were all Americans a bunch of times too. So when you came out of that and recovered out of that, your super compensation, you were ready to roll. So again, I think there's a balance, and the pendulum will swing back and forth. And I don't know. I think it's a telling thing of the community that we're in, regardless, that people are just weaker and softer than they used to be, me included.
Well, and I also look at it, I mean, the risk rewards. I mean, as you said, for your guys, price of admissions was 3 blues. Like I guarantee you a guy coming in there and taking a blue off and putting a green on, probably the words "get the hell out of the weight room" probably came very quick and very, very,
well, it was just one of those, like, really? You would just kind of go, come on. I mean, really? And it just sounds, but peer pressure is a good thing too, right? Like,
but I mean, you are part of the tribe too.
You're part of the tribe and you're held to a certain standard. I mean, when I got there, and again, not to make it a sexist thing, that Coach Judge didn't let me lift with the guys until I was stronger than the girls. I was the only male that had to train with the females because I walked on and I was a skinny, not super strong guy. So it's like, all right, you got to train with Dawn and Lisa until you're stronger than them. And I remember having to squat 365 for 5, and I beat Lisa by 5 pounds that day. And that's how I graduated off of that rack as like a 190-pound freshman, because I was like, I better, because I'm tired of training with Dawn and Lisa. This is emasculating. Like, they're kicking my ass. But that's good, right? Dawn and Lisa didn't care. They were just an extra rest period in someone else's spot. Like, they were cool with it. But, I wanted to train over there with the dudes, like the big boys, and so there was like this coming of age where, like, when I put on enough body weight and got strong enough, I got to, lift with Kevin and Wolfie and all these other just monsters over there. That was awesome.
You bring something interesting up in your story, and it's something that we touch on from time to time in the podcast. So, I think you said your father's started the business around 1980, so that you're around 5, 6 years old, somewhere around there.
Yep.
And he's building all this weight equipment, through your formative years, but it didn't seem like you really got into it until college.
Right.
And one of the things that we're asking college strength coaches all the time is, what would an incoming freshman, what kind of tools that would be good for them coming in? Did you have the tools and the understanding of weight training, but you just weren't into it, and then you got into it? Or was it was just you were around it, but you didn't really participate in what your father was doing?
Oh, no, I was, that's a good question. I mean, I was into it. I was just a late bloomer also. So, I mean, I think I cleaned 100 pounds over body weight in high school. So I was pretty strong, and I was a double body weight deadlifter since I was 8 years old. So like I knew how to do the stuff. But I didn't live with my dad, so I wasn't around it all the time. So I didn't really start like true weight training until my freshman year in high school. And I was always like a few years developmentally behind all my friends. So I was kind of the tall, skinny kid that was like late in puberty that I wasn't developing. And I just kind of really hit puberty hard my freshman year in college, which just kind of worked out. Like, I think my squat went from 320 for a single to 445 for 5 in a year. And I'm like, oh, cool. This is great. Like, all right, I put on 30 pounds of body weight. This is fantastic. And so I wanted it, but I kind of had come to the realization, the false realization is I'm this skinny kid that's a hard gainer, and I'm going to go through the motions. I'm going to sure try, but I'm not going to have this wild success. And then it was once I got on the South Carolina track team with a bunch of other people who were also equally motivated. It's hard to keep up motivation when you're motivated, but you're not good at it. Like I know your buddies that kind of halfway try because they're developmentally 2 or 3 years older than you. Like they work out for a month and they're stronger than you. I'm like, well, shit, this sucks. That guy just woke up today and he's stronger than I am, and I've been trying this for a few years. So, I mean, that's a thing I would say they need to, assess where is that person in their developmental stage. And there's the obvious, facial hair, blah, 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 all that stuff like that. But then to be able to kind of wrap your arm around that guy or girl and be like, hey, you still got a lot of growing to do. Like, this is going to be awesome. Let's make sure the technical aspects of these lifts, because that was what was cool. I was already good at cleans. I was already knew how to snatch, and I knew how to squat when I got to college. I was good at the motions. I just wasn't strong. So Coach Judge didn't need to coach me a whole lot. He just needed to hammer me with intensity and make me eat a lot. And then, of course, when my body kicked in, it was like, so that's the thing. I would build in that base.
So you're of the opinion that athletes should be learning the movements, but not necessarily loading on until they hit that phase where they're a man, essentially.
I would say learn the movements as early as possible. 100%. I mean, my kids at 6, they already knew how to deadlift. I mean, that's totally fine. Learn the basic movements. And I would even say some of the heavier lifting wasn't even, I would even say, I mean, I went for it prior to really puberty hitting. It's just the result wasn't there. I went for some heavier stuff and tried hard. But then to not have a giant expectation of result until a little bit later, and not live on like, we got to hit these numbers. It's like, you want to strain, because I think learning to strain is something that you got to learn a little bit early too. Like, again, my 8 years old, I did a double body weight deadlift. It was my max deadlift. That was as much as I could pull, but it teaches you early, like, this is pain. This is, it still goes up. And that kind of just toughens you to the point where you're like, okay, my hands might hurt some. It might be kind of hard and I'll shake around, but I'll stand up and then like, I'll drop the bar and then I'm going to go play with my G.I. Joe mitt. Like it's literally, it's okay for some pain early on. And I think a lot of people just don't feel that strain these days. And again, I don't mean strain as like actual muscle injury, but it's pretty freaking hard to hurt a kid. I'll be honest. Like they're little barometers inside of them. Don't really let them get hurt too much from internal tension building. That's my personal opinion.
Well, and the great thing about the weight room, and I've said this to my 3 children, 225 on a bar is 225 on a bar. It does not care if you're having a good day, bad day, mad, you want to cry. Let's go. Let's move it. Like, yeah. And that's, I think you hit it right on the head right now. Especially in the society that we're in, it's immediate gratification. Sure. Whereas all 3 of us know there is no immediate gratification in the weight room. I mean, it is the importance of consistency, showing up on a daily, being intent every day that you come in to get better. That's where, everybody says embrace the process. That's the process.
Yeah.
The ability, and Jocko says the great discipline's greater than motivation. Because motivation at some point is going to burn away.
Of course.
Are you disciplined on the days that you don't want to go into the weight room or go for your run? Are you disciplined enough to get it done?
Yep.
And if the answer is no, then whatever your goals are not aligned with your actions. So you got to figure that out as well.
Absolutely. And as we well know, you remain disciplined long enough with a goal in mind. Eventually you get addicted to discipline and the process. Like, even when I'm not training for anything, I can't go more than 2 days and not train or do something physically demanding. My mood changes. I bet I change hormonally, like and I just tell my wife, I'm like, oh no, something's going on. She's like, you train? I'm like, oh, I've been busy. Like, right. Exactly. It's like, because I tooled my body that I need some strain. I need to push against something, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally. I need to growl a little bit and grit my teeth. Like, that's a very intent part of my buildup. And I think I wouldn't say addicted myself, but I laid that fabric early in life where that became something that I needed to touch every few days.
How does your training help your performance while you're hunting?
Well, I mean, obviously the GPP, the general physical preparedness is very obvious there. I mean, we did 100 miles last week in the desert mountains, so carrying a pack in 100-degree temperature. So just the ability to move and go that long, climbing mountains, core stability. And so it's just been a good basis. Now my training has changed significantly since I was a guy that would compete for, a 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds in an event, then get to rest for 20 minutes. Like, that was a great sport, by the way. That's fantastic. But when you have to go all day and crawl and move and things like that, my knowledge of training has really helped, but also just where I could just shift gears and say, okay, instead of being insanely powerful and my rate of force development being incredible and all this other stuff, I need sustainability. I need to be able to, hold plank positions and move in these, more almost like a yoga-esque type thing, which I'm horrible at, but being able to do it, and carry stuff out and all that other stuff, it's been a big help, because I don't live at an altitude. So I live at 250, I live at an altitude, which is 250 feet above sea level. And most of my big hunts are, 5,000 to 8,000. So, and I'm carrying packs and things like that. So my streamlined hardship of the weight room has been how I actually stay within striking range of my outdoor pursuits.
You were telling us earlier about, how easy it is to miss a shot. And it seems like in that moment, as you're taking the shot, your ability to remain silent so that you don't stir up the animals is important. Does the training help with that, to keep everything still?
Yes. Yeah. I think the physical training perspective of like posturally being able to be in positions or move super slowly and be in weird positions for, say you're in this position about to draw and the deer looks at you. I've had to like draw my bow, hold my bow back for 1 minute to 2 minutes at times, because the deer is out of range or his vitals are covered up and he's looking at you. So letting the bow down isn't an option, or you're blown. And I remember being at probably 10 yards from a deer one time. I'm sitting in a ditch, deer's above me, and he goes to cross the ditch and his chest is covered up by this tree, and he's sitting there looking at me from 10 yards, and I'm at full draw. And all I can remember is thinking, man, I'm glad I did those heavy rows this year, because I was just holding my bow. And I remember thinking, I was like, man, most people wouldn't be able to hold a 70-pound bow back still. And then I ended up making the shot, which when he finally moved. But it's like those times you're like, just like every other sport, like, wow, I'm glad I trained for that. But the biggest thing mentally for me, especially like when you're going for a long shot or stalk or something like that, is the confidence level. And that's what I gained from competition and going after those heavy weights. And sometimes it's going after weight that you're afraid of, which builds that confidence. And so, when you're able to clear your mind, lower your heart rate, and focus on the success of the shot going where it needs to go, that was something that I learned from my days in hammer throwing. So I've been able to pull these other things out and reallocate them to new skills.
And also, if you let that arrow go, Cam would never let you live it down.
Oh yeah, because Cam is a freak, by the way. He's an absolute beast. So I don't even know. He doesn't make sense, but yeah.
One of the other major themes we talk about is to enhance athletic ability, kids got to play multiple sports. Talk to us about how hunting plays into that. You got a kid, sixth grade through 12th grade. If they took up hunting, how does that translate over into other general athletic ability?
That's a good question. I mean, it always depends on the type of outdoor pursuit, or say if it's hunting, let's be honest, if they're living in suburban Ohio and they're going to go sit in and walk 200 yards and sit in a deer stand, the things they're going to be training at that point are patience. You're not really boredom, and then to be able to compete when you got to compete. And that's kind of where those, like a friend of mine, he killed this monster bull elk a few years ago. I was asking the story, and he was after this one bull for like 23 days and, hiking and tracking this bull down. And he gets in on him and he goes down in this drainage and he sneaks in on him to 19 yards, which is super close. And he said the bull's down in the drainage. So he can't come out, but he can't see him. So he's just basically down this thick stuff. And he sat there with his bow ready to shoot for, it was like 6 or 7 hours. And that sounds like a long time until you put it into perspective of when that bull stands up, which is totally on his time, you have about 3 seconds to shoot. So it would be like me getting in your face and going, we're going to fight, but it's going to be on me. And in the next 8 hours, we're going to do it. And you have to stay ready for 8 hours. Like, all right. And then like an hour into it, you're like thinking of your wife, thinking of like an old episode of Seinfeld, and you're not, and then boom, and that's the thing. You look at that mental fortitude to stay focused for hearing that stick break when that bull stands up and realize I just picked up an extra second of time that I might need to close this deal. Like that to me is most kids can't focus for 20 seconds, much less 6 hours by yourself staring at
It almost sounds like baseball. Like baseball,
Right.
most of the time you're sitting around waiting for something to happen. But if you're playing, you need to be focused for that whole boring time,
Right.
because it's going to go so fast.
Right. Well, it's weird. There a lot of good bow hunters are baseball players. I never put those two together, but it's a lot of nothing happening until it happens then, and that play that day might be the reason why you're paid millions. Like that time, and that's really where there's the physical, like you better keep going and going and going and going, but then there's also the time when it's the fight's going to come to your doorstep in the next 3 days. You better be ready, and that's the crazy part about it. So I think that it builds a different level of strength depending on what they're doing in the outdoors. And sometimes what I've told people too, just the understanding of Mother Nature, that it doesn't care if it's cold and hot or rain or whatever it may be. It's no one's fault, and it doesn't matter. And that's something that taught me early on, when Dad would be like, all right, well, you come back, and he's like, you have a good hunt? I was like, I froze my ass off. He's like, did you bring your raincoat? I'm like, no, I forgot. He's like, won't forget next time. And you're like, yeah, it's 40 degrees. It's raining like crazy. I'm sitting in a tree thinking I'm going to die because it's so cold. And you're like, yeah, but no one, it's just what happens, and you have to adjust to it. And I think that's such a good lesson for people, is you have to prepare. Every training is preparation. And then even the preparing for a hunt and bringing your gear and making sure you're ready, that's all preparation. And if it goes sideways in the outdoors, it could go really sideways. You don't get to have a ref cut it quick. If you're 15 miles back in the Barb Marshall wilderness and something goes awry, you got a problem on your hands. And I like that part, though. I like the truth of that. I like that there's no posturing. There's no bullshit of you better have your stuff tight or you're going to have a really rough day. But that's what gets me engaged, because then there's a risk of road. That's fun.
Well, and you look at it, if you're going bear hunting and you miss that shot on that bear, well, now the bear's coming at you.
There's certainly an option. I mean, Cam almost got chewed on this year with that big grizzly.
And that paw was huge.
Yeah, he shot him, and they went in a little early. The shot was a little bit off, and the bear charged at 4 yards. 4 yards. Big grizzly.
12 feet.
They were able to kill the bear. But he dropped 9 feet from him, and you go, okay, if that shot was off, by the time you could rack another shell in, that bear is chewing on somebody. And that's That's real deal right there. Like
Yeah.
those are high stakes poker.
Well, there's a couple things, as we wrap this up, the gentleman you talked about stalked the deer for 23 days. He then had to stay there for 6 hours.
Yeah.
For a 3-second shot.
Right.
So 23 days, 6 hours, 3 seconds.
Right.
That's commitment.
Yeah. And you look at it and go, okay, was it all to see that arrow fly for that 0.5 seconds and enter that giant bull elk and watch him pile up? Was it all for that? And the answer is it can't be all for that. No. It has to be for the process, right? It has to be for this is crazy. No one else would be out here doing this. I've chosen this as being a Mysogi of sorts, something that is wildly difficult to do. And I'm going to go against the odds and try to solve this problem. And that's the key, like what they call like a Mysogi, which is if you get a chance to read the book, The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. And he talks about like putting yourself in challenging situations that the challenge is so high that it's a 50-50 chance whether you'll be successful. Now, you don't put yourself in a dangerous situation as a 50-50 chance you'll die, because that's just stupid. But there's a 50-50 chance where you're going to have to push as hard as you possibly can to only give yourself a 50-50 chance. And that's where, like, I look at something like that, you go, oh, he just created a Mysogi. I'm going to go kill a world-class, absolute giant of an animal, find it, take a year to find him, scout all summer, find this one bull I'm going to go kill, and I'm going to dedicate September to killing him with a bow. Man.
And the first time I heard about a Mysogi was Jesse Eisler was talking about it, I think on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he had heard about it from Kyle Cover, which was one of his basketball players with the Hawks, where it's a physical activity done one time a year. Yes. That is so stressful. Like you said, it's that 50-50 that you might be successful or you might not be. But It's so intense that you can only do it once a year.
Right. And you want what from other rules that I know Michael talked about in his book is you want it to be something that's novel, where you can't have other people kind of weigh against it. Like if you were about to say, I'm going to bench press, you're like, yeah, but you know what a good bench press is like. And so you do something that's novel where there is no preconceived notion of how difficult it is or not. And then you don't tell a lot of people about it either, because you don't want social pressure, good or bad, to take into any account. So you want to say like, I'm going to walk to Augusta next week, which is 55 miles that way. Now, most likely I wouldn't do that, but I could do it. And then how it would work is I would just go do it. I'd maybe tell my wife, I'm going to go do this here. I got my phone with me. I'm going to go do it and do something so audacious that's so freaking hard, but I'm not going to put it on social media. Hey, go fund me. And while I walk to Augusta, and shoot me DMs all day and cheer me on, because that's not what it's about. It's about saying, I've decided to do this thing, this challenge, and it's me and the guy in the mirror doing this. And if I fail, only I know I fail, and I failed myself. But if I succeed, only I know I succeed. And is only me knowing I succeed worth it? Or do I have to call my shot out there and then go, I got to do this because my X number of followers will be disheartened if I don't do this thing, and I get to post about it and all this other. So like, no, man, if I can't walk to Augusta, I just call a cab and come home and be disgusted with myself that I quit and think about how I could be better. And that's
is it a prerequisite that is it a prerequisite that you can only do this once a year? Because I feel like if you fail, you've got to sit with that failure for the whole year without having to redeem yourself. And that's part of the challenge too.
That's a part of the challenge too. Yeah, that's why you don't do it a whole lot. And if it's a true Mysogi, it's going to be so stressful to the body, you can't do them all the time. Like you're going to have to mentally, physically, emotionally recover from it, because it should be hard. Like I think what Michael Easter was talking about, one guy he knew, they had an 80-pound rock, and 3 or 4 men carried that rock 5 kilometers underwater down the beach in like 10 feet of water. So they would literally go underwater and grab the rock and run. And and then drop it and go up. And the next guy would grab it, and they would just relay a rock 5 kilometers underwater. A giant freaking rock. Like, the best part about you, like, novel? Yeah, who would think of that? That's absolutely idiocy. But you're like, hey, there's a chance to die doing that. There's a chance to get eaten by a shark or a jellyfish or a million other things that could happen to you. They had a rescue diver there to make sure no one died. But part of it was like, hey, we're us 3 or 4 dudes, we're going to go do this. And it's absolutely ridiculous to do this, but that's why we're doing it. And it might take us 8 hours to do this. And we're not going to stop until we're done doing it. And there's part of me that says, that's a coming of age. There's a transition into a different state of being. And that's part of what the world's missing right now.
I think you are a part of one of these when Brandon Lilly rode 100,000 meters at
his birthday, yeah,
at headquarters.
Yeah, that was an interesting story. So we were hanging out at, where were we? It was New Year's Day. I remember him talking about some of his clients, and he was making goals for them. And they said something, and Brandon Lilly, 2-time world champion powerlifter, and they had him do something. They go, well, it's easy for you to say, Brandon, all your goals are strength related and you're strong. And he's like, oh yeah. He was like, well, I'm going to freaking row a half marathon. And he literally just got on the rower and just did it. It was like an hour and a half of rowing. And I mean, he just fell on the ground and about died and had the whole diet. He didn't train for it, just literally went from powerlifting to doing that. And then the next day he did it again. And then the next day he did it again. And he told me, he's like, yeah, and I'm going to do a full marathon on the 7th day. And just to prove a point to himself. And there was 3 hours into it. I mean, he was like, the whole thing, had a full mental breakdown, emotional breakdown, the whole deal, crying, calling his wife, and he was 3.5 hours on a rower. You got to think this was like a 280-pound man with, a cumulative like 15, 18 knee surgeries at the time. And then, so we were at SHOT Show, we're all hanging out, and he's like, hey, what I'm going to do for my birthday this year, I'm going to row 100,000 meters instead of like whatever that was before, how many ever meters it was. It was like 2.5 marathons. And I was like, when are you going to do it? He's like, I'm going to do it on my birthday, and I want to do it down at Sorinex. So he got in at 5 a.m. He stayed here, got up at 5 a.m. and rode for like 11 hours and 58 minutes. And he made it right under 12 hours. And then we had rowers set up beside him, and like I'd go out and row 10,000 meters with him. Someone else we just rotated out guys that rode with him. But that son of a gun rode for 12 straight hours.
And for people that have not been on a rowing machine,
it's insane.
12 hours on a rowing machine, no thank you.
Oh, I mean, I was on for maybe an hour, like I did my 10,000, which was by far the furthest I've ever gone. And it was like, all right, we're out of here. Like, this is enough, But we set up, we were like, what movie? We set up all of his favorite movies on the screen, and he just rode all day long. And it was like, I mean, what a Mysogi right there. Like, yeah, I think he ended up pulling in like $25,000 like donations that he gave to Camp Southern Ground. So it's cool.
Yeah. I mean,
Bert, where can people find you on the internet, social media, get in contact with you?
Yep. Bert Sorin, BertSorin on Instagram. Pretty much the one I'm most active on. Sorinex.com, Sorinex on Instagram, Sorinex Outdoors on Instagram. I'm on there a decent amount, and Sorinex Squattober if you want to do something super fun coming up this October. The world's largest squat party is 30 days, kind of a Mysogi in itself. Do something that's really freaking hard for 30 days and it changes your life. So if you want to get on that, that could be your own Mysogi. 50-50 chance, actually less than a 50 chance you'll actually finish. And it's not because you physically can't, just most people won't. And but the people who do get to the other end of it are usually well, no, not usually. They're always impressed about what they've been able to accomplish. And almost everyone comes out with a new PR. And it's incredible to see how the body's changed. So if you want a real challenge, you want your own Mysogi, hit Sorinex Squattober on IG and do the programming, free programming all month by Aaron Osmus. And that's that.
When do you have the date set for the next Summer Strong? For those that might be,
I think it's May 2021 or maybe 1920, something like that. It's okay. Friday, Saturday, May.
Yeah,
but right around the 20th.
Awesome.
Yeah, expect to see my ugly mug down there this year.
Yeah.
Again.
Well, I'll say we'll probably put tickets on sale March-ish, February, something like that.
If you've never been,
We already got a
you gotta
couple
go.
good speakers.
Well, Bert, it was great meeting you, man. Thanks for coming
Great
on.
meeting
We
you, Chris.
appreciate your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Yes, Bert, thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule and
Yes.
everything that you've done for me, my family, and for our profession. I am indebted to you and your family and your crew down there in South Carolina. They do a great job. So
Thank you. That's why we do it, man. Hopefully change lives. People think it's so we could sell steel rectangles, but the joke is that is not it at all.
What do you got, Chris?
We are the Athlete Hackers. My name's Chris Stray. Check us out on Apple, Google, Breaker, Anchor, YouTube. Did I say YouTube already? We've
No.
got more guests coming
Spotify.
up and some software where you can access our content. Thanks for tuning in today.
Thanks, guys.
All my best. God bless and peace.
Peace.
See you, brother.
That'll be good. Have a good